My name is Alex, and I never imagined I would find myself in a situation like this. I grew up in a small town where trust and loyalty were the pillars of every relationship. My parents raised me to believe in the sanctity of marriage, and I took those lessons to heart. I met Laura in college and we fell in love quickly. She was everything I had ever wanted: smart, funny, and fiercely independent. We got married 5 years later, and I thought I had found my forever. We built a life together, filled with shared dreams and plans for the future. Laura was my partner in every sense, and I trusted her implicitly. We laughed together, supported each other through hard times, and celebrated our successes. I even thought we were on the same page about starting a family soon. But that trust began to unravel one fateful afternoon. It was a typical Tuesday. I had just returned from work, looking forward to a quiet evening with Laura. She had mentioned a meeting with a friend earlier in the day, and I assumed it was a casual catch-up. As I entered the house, I noticed something was off. The air felt heavy, as if it were charged with unspoken words. Laura was in the kitchen, her back to me as she stirred a pot on the stove. "Hey babe," I called out, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. "How was your day?" "Busy," she replied, not turning around. "Just making dinner." I shrugged it off and went to change. As I walked through the hallway, I noticed her phone on the coffee table, screen lit up with a message notification. Curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at the screen. The name that flashed across it sent a chill down my spine: Ryan. Ryan was a teenager, a boy just a few years older than my youngest sister. I had heard Laura mention him before, but I thought nothing of it. He was a family friend, the son of her college classmate. But this time the message was different. It was flirty, playful. My heart raced, and I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself that I was overreacting. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't ignore the gnawing anxiety in my gut. I needed to know more, and I had to confront Laura. After dinner, I brought it up. "Laura, can we talk about Ryan?" Her demeanor shifted instantly. The warmth in her eyes faded, replaced by a guarded expression. "What about him?" she asked, her tone clipped. "I saw a message on your phone. It seemed inappropriate." For a moment, silence hung between us like a thick fog. Then she sighed, her defenses crumbling. "Alex, it's not what you think." But deep down, I knew it was. The confession that followed twisted my heart into knots. Laura had been seeing Ryan, and it wasn't just a casual fling. They had been involved for months. As she spoke, the laughter that once filled our home echoed with the silence of my shattered trust. Each word felt like a dagger, piercing through the love I thought we shared. "How could you?" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling with betrayal. "With a teenager, Laura, what were you thinking?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't muster any sympathy. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I thought it was just harmless flirting at first, but then it became more." I felt a fire ignite within me, a need for justice, for accountability. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a violation of everything I believed in. I wanted to scream, to make her understand the gravity of her actions. But I remained silent, grappling with the whirlwind of emotions threatening to consume me. As she continued to plead her case, justification spilling from her lips, I realized that I had to act. I had to ensure she faced the consequences of her actions, not just for myself but for the sake of what was right. The days following that fateful confrontation felt like I was trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. I moved through life on autopilot, existing in a haze of confusion, anger, and disbelief. The betrayal was a heavy weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I replayed our last conversation in my mind, her tear-streaked face haunting me. How could she do this? And why with someone so much younger? I spent hours in my home office, trying to focus on work, but my mind always drifted back to Laura and Ryan. The image of her laughing with him, the way she must have looked at him with that spark of excitement, it made my blood boil. I was furious, not only at her but also at myself for trusting her so completely. One evening, while scrolling through social media to distract myself, I stumbled upon a picture of Laura and Ryan together at a party. They were smiling, arms wrapped around each other, oblivious to the world. My heart sank, and a surge of nausea washed over me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't just a fling, it was a full-blown affair, and I felt like the last person to know. I couldn't let this slide. I needed to confront the truth to make sure that both Laura and Ryan faced the consequences of their actions. Reporting her felt extreme, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it was the only option left. I had to make her understand the severity of her choices, and perhaps even protect Ryan from the repercussions of his own naivety. The next day, I made my way to the local police station. My heart raced as I walked through the doors, the smell of disinfectant, and the sound of ringing phones creating an atmosphere of urgency. I approached the front desk, my palms sweaty and my mind racing with what I needed to say. "I need to report something," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. The officer looked up, raising an eyebrow, and I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "My wife is having an affair with a minor." The officer's expression shifted from curiosity to seriousness. "Can you provide more details?" I explained everything, the messages, the pictures, and the age difference. As I spoke, I felt a strange mix of fear and empowerment. I was taking control of the situation, but I was also aware of the consequences of my actions. Laura would face legal repercussions, and I couldn't help but feel conflicted about that. After filing the report, I left the station and sat in my car, the weight of my decision settling heavily on my shoulders. I had crossed a line, but I felt justified. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about holding her accountable for her actions. The following weeks were a blur of legal proceedings. Laura was summoned to court, and I received a notification about the hearing date. Each time I saw her name on the paperwork, it felt like a stab to the heart. I knew I had to be there, but the thought of facing her again made my stomach churn. When the day finally arrived, I walked into the courtroom, my heart racing. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the weight of unspoken words and judgment. I spotted Laura sitting in the defendant's chair, her eyes downcast. She looked small and vulnerable, stripped of the confidence she once had. The prosecutor laid out the case against her, detailing the extent of the relationship with Ryan and the implications of her actions. I listened intently, feeling a strange mixture of anger and pity. Laura's defense attorney tried to paint the picture of a woman who had made a mistake, but I was beyond that. As the judge deliberated, I thought about what had led us to this point. My heart ached for the love we once shared, but I knew that love had been shattered beyond repair. The gavel struck, and the judge delivered her verdict. Laura was charged with a misdemeanor for engaging in sexual conduct with a minor. The consequences were significant, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't enough. As I left the courtroom, I felt hollow, the reality of the situation sinking in. I had set out for justice, but all I felt was emptiness. I returned home to an empty house, the silence deafening. I had taken a stand, but it felt like I had lost everything. I sank into the couch, staring at the walls that once held laughter and memories. I was left with nothing but the echo of betrayal and the haunting question, what now? The days after the court hearing were some of the hardest I had ever faced. I was a man adrift, grappling with the fallout of my decisions. I had sought justice, but all I felt was a profound sense of loss. Laura was facing legal consequences, but the emotional toll on me was far greater. I had effectively dismantled the life we built together, and the weight of that realization sat heavily on my shoulders. Friends and family were supportive, but their concern felt like a double-edged sword. They wanted to know what happened, and I had to recount the story. Over and over. Each retelling made the pain sharper, the betrayal fresher. I could see the shock on their faces as I described how Laura had strayed, and I felt a strange sense of satisfaction in their disbelief. It validated my pain, but it also made me feel more isolated. One evening, I met up with my best friend Mike at a local bar. I needed to talk, to vent, and he was always good at listening. As we sat at the bar nursing our drinks, I finally opened up about everything. "Dude, I can't believe she would do this to you. With a kid, no less," Mike said, shaking his head in disbelief. "What were you thinking, reporting her? I mean, I get it, but it's heavy." "I know," I replied, staring into my glass, "but I couldn't just let it go. She needs to understand the consequences of her choices. I can't let this slide." "Sure, but you realize this is going to change everything, right? You might be pushing her away for good." I nodded, knowing he was right. But it was too late for second thoughts. I had made my choice, and now I had to live with it. As the weeks passed, I became increasingly aware of the societal implications of what had happened. News of Laura's case circulated around town, and whispers followed me wherever I went. I could feel the stares, the judgment. People I thought I knew turned their backs, unable to reconcile the image of the perfect couple with the reality of our shattered marriage. In the midst of it all, I received a call from Laura's attorney. She wanted to discuss a potential plea deal. I agreed to meet, but I was torn. Part of me wanted to see her take full responsibility, while another part of me felt an overwhelming urge to protect her, to shield her from the harsh reality of her actions. The meeting was tense. Laura sat across from me, her demeanor a mix of defiance and vulnerability. She looked different, hollowed out by shame and regret. I could see the weight of her choices etched on her face, and it stirred a flicker of sympathy within me. "Alex, I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "I made a mistake and I'm so sorry." "Sorry does change what happened, Laura. You chose to betray me, you chose him." My voice was cold, but I felt a flicker of doubt creeping in. Was I being too harsh? I know," she exclaimed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But I want to make it right. I want to fix this." "Fix this? How do you plan to fix something that's broken beyond repair?" I leaned forward, the anger boiling beneath my skin. "You can't just say you're sorry and expect everything to go back to normal." We argued back and forth, the tension between us palpable. I was torn between wanting to hear her out and the overwhelming need to push her away. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, but I also wanted to understand how we got here. As we spoke, I began to realize that the road to healing would be long, if not impossible. Laura's plea deal would likely involve counseling and community service, but I wondered if any of it would truly make a difference. Would she learn from this? Or would it just be another chapter in her life that she would regret? As I left the meeting, I felt exhausted. I had confronted her, but there was no satisfaction in it, just pain. I thought about Ryan, too. He was a kid caught in the middle of an adult mess, and I hated that he was involved. I hoped he would learn from this experience, but I also knew he had been manipulated. I returned home to an empty house, and the silence felt deafening. I sat on the couch, staring at the walls, memories flooding my mind. I thought about all the dreams we had shared, the plans we had made, and how quickly it had all unraveled. I knew I had to find a way to move on, but how? The emotional scars were deep, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss. The weeks dragged on, each day blending into the next as I navigated the aftermath of Laura's betrayal. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, oscillating between anger, sadness, and a profound sense of loss. I had made the decision to report her and confront the truth, but the reality of my actions weighed heavily on me. I felt like a ghost haunting the remnants of a life that no longer existed. Laura's legal proceedings continued, and I found myself attending court hearings more frequently. Each time I saw her, sitting there in the defendant's chair, I felt a fresh wave of pain wash over me. She looked so small and defeated, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the right choice in pursuing this path. Did I truly want to see her pay for her mistakes, or was I just trying to numb my own hurt by inflicting pain on her? I began to isolate myself from friends and family. They meant well, offering support and understanding, but I didn't want to burden them with my turmoil. I felt like I was trapped in a bubble of grief, unable to reach out for help. The only solace I found was in the late-night hours when I could pour my heart out into a journal, letting the ink bleed my pain onto the page. Writing became my therapy, a way to process the chaos swirling in my mind. In one particularly raw entry I wrote, "I feel like I'm drowning in betrayal. I want to scream, to lash out, but I'm paralyzed by the weight of my own anger. I thought I knew her, and now I'm not even sure I know myself." Each word felt like a release, but the relief was fleeting. The next morning I would wake up to the same reality, the same aching void where love once thrived. One evening, as I sat in my dimly lit living room, I received an unexpected call from Mike. "Hey man, how are you holding up?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I'm surviving," I replied, trying to sound more composed than I felt. Listen, I know you've been through hell, but I think it might be time to think about moving forward. You can't keep living in the past. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so focused on Laura and the betrayal that I had neglected my own healing. What do you mean? I asked, genuinely curious. You need to find a way to reclaim your life. Maybe consider talking to someone, a therapist or a counselor. It could help you sort through all this. I hesitated, talking to. Someone felt like admitting defeat, but deep down I knew he was right. I had been carrying this burden alone for too long. I'll think about it, I said, but I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. After hanging up, I sat in silence, contemplating my next steps. I had been so consumed by my anger and hurt that I had forgotten to take care of myself. Maybe it was time to focus on healing, to find a way to move on from this nightmare. The following week, I made an appointment with a therapist. Walking into her office felt daunting, but I knew it was necessary. As I sat in the waiting room, I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. I was about to open up about the darkest parts of my life to a stranger. When my therapist, Dr. Bennett, finally called me in, I took a deep breath and stepped into her office. She was warm and inviting, her demeanor instantly putting me at ease. "What brings you here today?" she asked, her voice soothing. I hesitated, but then I poured out my story, the betrayal, the anger, the legal proceedings. I spoke about my conflicting emotions and the turmoil that had taken over my life. With each word, I felt the weight lift just a little. Dr. Bennett listened attentively, nodding and understanding. "It's completely natural to feel lost and angry after such a betrayal," she said gently. "You've experienced a significant trauma, and it's important to give yourself the grace to heal." Her words resonated with me. I realized I had been too hard on myself, expecting to move on as if nothing had happened. I needed to allow myself to grieve, to process the loss of the life I thought I had. As our sessions continued, I began to explore my feelings more deeply. I learned about the importance of setting boundaries and prioritizing my own well-being. Dr. Bennett encouraged me to focus on self-care, to rediscover the passions and interests I had neglected while wrapped up in my relationship with Laura. I started to take small steps. I rejoined a local gym, something I had loved before but had abandoned in the wake of my heartbreak. I also began to reconnect with old friends, slowly allowing myself to be vulnerable again. I found solace in the support of those who cared about me, and it felt good to share my journey with them. As I focused on rebuilding my life, I noticed a shift within myself. The anger I had felt towards Laura began to transform into a sense of acceptance. I realized that while her actions had devastated me, I couldn't let them define my future. I had the power to shape my own path, to move forward on my terms. But just as I began to feel hopeful, the legal proceedings took an unexpected turn. I received a letter from Laura's attorney, requesting a meeting to discuss a possible settlement. My heart raced as I read the words, a mix of anxiety and dread flooding through me. Would this be another opportunity for her to plead her case? Or was it a chance to finally find closure? I knew I had to confront her one last time, to face the reality of our fractured relationship. As I prepared for the meeting, I felt a renewed sense of resolve. I was no longer the broken man who had walked into that police station months ago. I was ready to take the next step, whatever that might be. The day of the meeting arrived, and I felt a mix of apprehension and determination as I made my way to Laura's attorney's office. The sun was shining, casting a warm glow over the city, but I couldn't shake the chill running down my spine. This would be the first time I had seen Laura since the court hearings, and I wasn't sure how I would react. As I entered the office, I was greeted by Laura's attorney, a stern woman in her 50s who exuded professionalism. "Thank you for coming, Alex," she said, ushering me into a conference room. "Laura will be here shortly." I took a seat at the long table, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the anticipation in the air, thick and heavy. I stared at the door, counting down the seconds until Laura would walk in. I had spent months processing my feelings, and now the moment of truth was upon me. When Laura finally entered the room, I was struck by how different she looked. The confident woman I had once known was gone, replaced by someone who seemed fragile and uncertain. Her eyes were red, and she wore an expression of vulnerability that made my heart ache. "Alex," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. The tension between us was palpable, and I could feel the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. The attorney began to outline the terms of the settlement. "We are proposing that Laura complete a series of counseling sessions and community service hours," she explained. "In exchange, we hope to avoid any additional legal action, and Laura is willing to accept full responsibility for her actions." I listened intently, trying to process the information. This was it, the culmination of everything that had happened. I had wanted her to face the consequences, but now that it was laid out before me, I felt a strange sense of ambivalence. "Is this enough?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with emotion. "Will this truly make a difference?" Laura's attorney looked at me with a mixture of understanding and professionalism. "This process is about accountability, but it's also about healing. We believe that this approach will allow Laura to reflect on her actions and the impact they've had." I turned to Laura, searching for any hint of remorse in her eyes. "Do you really understand the pain you've caused?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "This isn't just about you facing consequences, it's about the trust that's been shattered." "I know," she replied, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I never wanted this to happen. I didn't think about how my actions would affect you or anyone else. I was selfish, and I'm so sorry." Her apology felt genuine, but I was still struggling to reconcile my feelings. Part of me wanted to scream at her for the hurt she had caused, while another part wanted to reach out and comfort her. I was torn between the desire for revenge and the hope for closure. "Alex," she continued, "I can't change what I did, but I want to make amends. I want to learn from this and be a better person. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope you can at least see that I'm trying." I took a deep breath, the air thick with tension. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Laura. You've turned my life upside down, and I've lost so much because of your choices, but I do want to see you take responsibility." The attorney nodded, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Perhaps we can agree on a timeline for Laura's commitments, and we can revisit the situation in 6 months to see how she has progressed." I considered the proposal, weighing my options. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about accountability and growth. "All right," I finally said, "but I want regular updates on her progress. If she's truly committed to changing, I need to see it." Laura's expression brightened slightly, and I could see a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Thank you, Alex. I promise I will do everything I can to make this right." As the meeting concluded, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We had reached an agreement, and while it wasn't a magic solution, it was a step towards healing. I knew that the road ahead would still be challenging, but I was ready to face it. As I left the attorney's office, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a hint of closure. I had taken control of the situation, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. In the following weeks, I focused on my own healing. I continued my therapy sessions, finding strength in the process of rediscovering myself. I immersed myself in activities that brought me joy: hiking, reading, and spending time with friends. I even started dating again, cautiously opening my heart to the possibility of new connections. But every now and then, I would think of Laura. I hoped she was taking her commitment seriously, and I found myself rooting for her, despite everything. It was a strange feeling, caring about someone who had hurt me so deeply. But I realized that forgiveness wasn't about absolving her of her actions. It was about freeing myself from the chains of anger and resentment. As the 6-month mark approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I knew I would have to confront Laura again to see if she had truly changed. But this time, I felt prepared. I had taken back my power, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The day of the follow-up meeting arrived, and I felt a blend of nervousness and determination as I made my way to the attorney's office. This would be the moment of truth, an opportunity to see if Laura had genuinely committed to her path of accountability and growth. I had spent months focused on my own healing, but now I was about to come face to face with the woman who had shattered my world. As I entered the office, I noticed Laura sitting in the same conference room where we had met before. She looked different, more composed, perhaps even more mature. but the weight of our shared history still hung in the air. I could see the remnants of the pain etched in her features, but there was also a glimmer of resolve in her eyes. "Alex," she greeted me softly, her voice steady. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, unsure of what to say. As we settled into our seats, her attorney began by outlining the progress Laura had made. She had completed her counseling sessions, volunteered at a local community center, and had taken steps to educate herself about the impact of her actions. I listened intently, my heart racing as I processed the information. "Laura has shown significant improvement," her attorney said. "She understands the consequences of her actions and is committed to making better choices moving forward." "Is that true?" I asked, turning my focus to Laura. "Do you really understand what you did and how it affected me?" "Yes," she replied, her voice unwavering. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my choices, and I realize how selfish I was. I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to express. I'm committed to being a better person, not just for myself but for everyone I care about." As she spoke, I could see the sincerity in her eyes. It was a stark contrast to the woman I had confronted months ago. I had been prepared to feel anger and resentment, but instead, I found myself feeling something different: empathy. I had watched her journey from betrayal to accountability, and it was hard to ignore the growth that had taken place. "I appreciate your honesty, Laura," I said, my voice steady, "but I still have to protect myself. You broke my trust, and that's not something that can be easily repaired." "I understand," she replied, tears glistening in her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away or even at all. I just want you to know that I'm trying to be a better person, and I hope one day you can see that." I took a deep breath, weighing my feelings. I had spent so long harboring anger and resentment, and while I wasn't ready to forgive her completely, I could see that she was making an effort. "I think it's important for both of us to move forward," I said slowly. "I need to focus on my own healing, and part of that means letting go of the anger I've held on to." Laura nodded, her expression filled with understanding. "I want that for you too. You deserve to be happy, Alex." As the meeting concluded, we discussed the next steps. Laura would continue her counseling and community service, and we agreed to check in with each other periodically. It felt like a small step toward closure, but it was a step nonetheless. Walking out of the office, I felt lighter than I had in months. I wasn't fully healed, and I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but I had taken a significant step toward reclaiming my life. The anger that had consumed me for so long began to fade, replaced by a sense of clarity. I was ready to move on, ready to embrace the future. In the months that followed, I focused on building my life anew. I continued my therapy, explored new hobbies, and nurtured my relationships with friends. I even started dating someone new, someone who brought laughter and joy back into my life. It felt good to open my heart again, even if it was just a crack at first. As for Laura, I kept my distance but followed her progress from afar. I heard from mutual friends that she was doing well, continuing her community work and even taking classes to further her education. I felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. I had once loved her deeply, and while the hurt would never fully vanish, I could appreciate the growth she was undergoing. One evening, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened: the betrayal, the anger, the journey toward healing. I had learned so much about myself, about resilience and the importance of self-worth. I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, more self-aware. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about absolving Laura of her actions. It was about freeing myself from the chains of bitterness. I didn't have to forget what happened, but I could choose to let go of the anger that had weighed me down for so long. As I looked toward the future, I felt a sense of hope. I was ready to embrace new beginnings, to live life on my own terms. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I had taken my power back, and I was excited to see where the next chapter of my life would lead. This was my story, a story of betrayal, accountability, and ultimately, personal growth. I knew I would carry the scars of my past, but I also knew they would serve as a reminder of how far I had come. I was ready to move forward, to write the next chapter of my life with strength and purpose. and as I stepped into the future, I felt a sense of freedom. I was no longer defined by the betrayal. I was defined by my resilience, my capacity to heal, and my commitment to living authentically. The past was behind me, and the future awaited.